Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Fadel Soliman. As you heard, I'm the director of Bridges Foundation. I'm Egyptian, I'm Muslim, and I am married to only one wife. That was not an icebreaker. I just wanted to show you how I used for 20 years to introduce myself when I talk to non-Muslims, to deal with the prejudice before I talk. Because usually they say, okay, how many wives you have? The problem with racism is that racists know that they are racist, but they have no problem with that. Actually, they don't see it as immoral because racism is a way of thinking that deals with moral binarisms. Moral binarism, where there is us and them, there is East and West, and there is male and female. So binarisms exist. But when you think that the other human being is less human, or less intelligent, or less moral because of his race, color, or sex, then you become dangerous. When you call other humans cockroaches or sheep, you become dangerous. Because cockroaches can be squashed and sheep can be slaughtered. Hate speech is not just disgusting, it is lethal. After people read this garbage on newspapers last year, an Islamophobe pushed a woman wearing the headscarf in front of the train. Here. That was like a few days after this newspaper did that. So for me, this man is a victim as well. That's on YouTube, by the way, so I think it wasn't immoral for me to put it for you. So hate speech, the problem with hate speech is that it radicalizes. And it does not only radicalize the perpetrators or the haters, it also radicalizes victims. This man is Geert Wilders. And that's what I said in one of my comments today to one of the speakers, that you should include politics, not only race and religion. Most of the hate speakers today are politicians. We've seen the tweets of Donald Trump. We've seen the comments of Boris Johnson. And now we have Geert Wilders. He announced last summer a new Draw Muhammad contest, Draw Muhammad cartoon. And we got ready for him with making 33 short videos about Prophet Muhammad, and we kept them ready in 28 languages so that when he launches, we launch. But guess what happened? He canceled it. Not because we got ready for him. He didn't know that we were getting ready for him. Not because many Muslims rallied in Pakistan and some Asian countries and Malaysia. No. Who convinced him to cancel? The Taliban. The Taliban said, if you do this, we're going to put the Dutch soldiers on our priority list. He canceled. So guess who did this act of cancellation radicalize? What message are you sending to the Muslim youth? That the Taliban can convince you to deal with us appropriately, but not moderate Muslims like Bridges or others. Same thing, by the way, happened with ISIS and Charlie Hebdo. After Charlie Hebdo, go and check the internet. Charlie Hebdo issued a press release that they decided never to depict Prophet Muhammad again. What kind of message are you sending then? So the problem with hate speech is that it radicalizes both sides. That it increases the binarism. It increases this. Anyway, so the problem with this, when radicalization happens from people like Trump and Wilders and those people, is that it is normalizing racism. When racists see people being racist and in office, and that's normal. dehumanizing other by telling them they are cockroaches and sheep, and it means that it's like saying either you upgrade and become like us, or we will squash you. You can really read two books on this. They will tell you a lot about Western racism. White Man's Burden by William Easterly, and Post-Colonial Studies by three researchers, Gareth Griffiths, Helen Tiffin, and Bill Ashcroft. But let me now take you to the Arab world. Because racism existed in Arabia before Islam, 14 centuries ago, and it was far more worse than it is in the West. Far more worse. Arabs, despite that they were not as civilized as the Persians or the Romans, still they felt superior than Persians and Romans. Arabs call animals, this is ajma animal, which means an animal that cannot speak, mute. But Arabs call non-Arab speaking people also, in the Arabic language, ajami, which means mute. Though he speaks, but not their language. If you don't speak my language, you're mute. You don't speak at all. You can't express yourself. So to this extent, the racism was there. And then, forget about the Arab world now, and let's talk again about the West. In 2009, the Americans were so proud of themselves, bringing a black president finally in office, and they should be really, really proud of themselves for bringing a president in office who was black. But in Egypt, we had a black president 40 years before that, and we didn't even realize it, except after Obama came. 40 years before Obama, we had President Sadat. And by the way, Egyptian people, the majority of Egyptian people are white Arabs like me, beautiful like me. But we never realized that we had a black president except after 30 years of his death, when we saw that. The issue, not only in Egypt, well, in Kuwait, Sheikh Saad al-Abdullah al-Salim al-Sabah was the Emir of Kuwait in 2006, was for 25 years the crown prince and the prime minister, and he's black. And most of the Kuwaitis, and we have Kuwaitis with us today, are white Arabs. They didn't have a problem with that. They didn't even mention this as something positive happening. It's not a development. It's not a development that happened recently. So, between the year 900, this is to prove to you that it's not a development. Between the year 946 and 968, a black African slave called Kafur became the ruler of Egypt. Not only Egypt, actually, his dynasty was so large. It included Egypt, Sudan, a part of Libya, a part of Arabia, all of Lebanon, all of Palestine, all of Syria, and a part of Iraq, and all of Jordan. And he was a black African slave. He was the ruler. People didn't have a problem with him. Actually, he was adored by the Egyptians because he was seen as a very generous and just ruler. Get ready for the surprise. Between the years 1250 and 1517, for about 270 years, there was a big dynasty in the Muslim world called the Mamluk dynasty. Mamluk dynasty means the dynasty of the slaves. The kings were slaves for 270 years. Here. That was the dynasty of the slaves, called the Mamluk dynasty, dynasty of the slaves. Egypt, Sudan, parts of Libya, a part of Kuwait is included, Iraq is included, Syria, Palestine, Lebanon, Jordan, all of these territories. Why? And by the way, one of the scholars, Muslim scholars, issued a fatwa and he said, this is illegitimate. The ruler must be free. They cannot be slaves, so they have to be sold. And the summoners went in the streets, summoning people for the sale, saying, princes for sale. And they lined up, and the state department, the state, bought them and freed them, emancipated them, so that they can rule legitimately with consensus of all scholars. The issue is, what's the secret? How did Islam deal successfully with racism, the racism of the Arabs. And this is the part that is worrying me a little bit, because I'm afraid that some of you will think that I'm indoctrinating or proselytizing. I'm not. I'm going to just show you how Islam dealt with this racism, with this rooted problem in the Arabs. It's through the belief in the original sin. And I know that whenever you mention the word original sin, people coming from Christian background especially will think about Adam eating from the tree, and then God sending his only begotten son to die for us on the cross. That's not the original sin in Islam. Well, the word original in Islam denotes the very first one. The very first sin, according to the Quran, is not the sin of Adam. Rather, when God created the human being, he gave him superiority in learning skills, even above the angels. And then he ordered all the creation, including the angels, to prostrate. All of them did, and they prostrated for the boss who will be managing the world, because he has this learning skills, except one, Satan. He refused to bow down for Adam. God blamed him in the Quran, telling him, why didn't you prostrate yourself to the one that I created as I commanded you? And he said, because I am better than him. You created me from fire, and you created him from clay. I am white and he's black. I am European and he's Arab. I am Arab and he's Indian. It's the same thing exactly. So according to Islamic teachings, the original sin is racism. God told him, get out from paradise. You cannot act as a racist here. Literally, he said, you cannot act arrogantly here. He was arrogant because of his race, not because he was richer. Okay, so here, what I want to tell you is that when Trump tweets racism, he's normalizing racism. But Islam marginalized racists. He told racists, when you become racist, you are marginalizing yourself. You're getting yourself out of the fold of Islam, because the original sin is racism, and racists have no place in paradise. So it's an internal message. If you do so, you are excommunicating yourself. The second thing also, we have also other examples. There was a companion of Prophet Muhammad. Of course, when the Prophet, peace be upon him, appeared in Arabia 14 centuries ago, most of those who followed him in the beginning were the vulnerable, women and slaves mainly. So among his very first companions was over 23 African slaves. The most famous of them is called Bilal ibn Rabah, who was the mu'adhin. Mu'adhin means the caller who calls to prayer, because the Prophet appointed him for his melodious voice to be the one who calls to prayer. And in a small dispute between him and one of the companions of Prophet Muhammad, that companion called Abu Dharr called him, "Oh, you son of the black woman." And the Prophet rebuked him and told him, "You are taunting him about his black mother? You are a fellow who still has some remnants of Jahiliyyah." The word Jahiliyyah means, Jahiliyyah is the time of ignorance, which is the name of the era before Islam. So when the Prophet told him that, in a sense he's telling him, you are ignorant. So the Prophet belittled racism. So one of the ways also that Islam dealt with this is by belittling racism and racists. No one likes to be belittled. And no one likes to be called or looked at as ignorant. So what happened? He put his cheek on the ground and he swore by God he's not going to lift his face until the son of the black woman steps on the other cheek with his shoes. That's how the man self-disciplined himself. This is how he felt. The Prophet unequivocally condemned racism in his last sermon also, which is a very famous sermon of Prophet Muhammad, when he said there is no privilege for an Arab over an Arab, nor for an Arab, nor for a non-Arab over an Arab. And there is no privilege for a white over a black, nor for a black over a white, except in righteousness. So if you are more righteous, you are closer to God. You are, okay, thank you. definitely in the Arab world there is racism. Definitely now there is racism. But it's not by practicing or good Muslims or Muslims who ponder the teachings of Islam. We have also an example in modern times, who's Malcolm X. Malcolm X is one of the leaders of the Black Liberation Movement in the United States of America. But at a certain time, of course, we know that what all those people went through in America, the racial discrimination in the 50s and 60s when he appeared, and he was actually racist. He hated white people so much. He followed some teachings at that time that existed in America that Satan is white, white is the bad color, the good color is black, everyone black is, and so on. Anyway, this man went to Hajj or pilgrimage, and there he wrote a letter that he sent to his loyal assistants in his newly formed Muslim mosque in Harlem, announcing to the press the change, the transformation that happened to him. And he said, during the past 11 days here in the Muslim world, I have eaten from the same plate, drank from the same cup, slept on the same rug with fellow Muslims whom their skin is the whitest of white. Their eyes are the bluest of blue. Their hair is the blondest of blonde. And in their deeds and in their actions, I felt the same sincerity of the black people. And then he returned back to the United States and he joined mainstream Islam. One of the also very strong ways of making Muslims, neutralizing racism in Muslims, is praying 5 times a day. Because when I pray, I stand in a circle around the Kaaba. Those circles around the Kaaba keep on widening all over the earth. The Kaaba is not an idol that Muslims worship, by the way. Muslims believe that this cube-shaped building cannot do any harm or any benefit to anyone. It just acts as a center that unites Muslims around it in circles. That's it. And the circles keep on widening. So when we pray here in the mosque in Scotland in 3 straight lines, those are not straight lines. Those are 3 sectors of 3 circles around the Kaaba. And even if I pray in my hotel room individually, I know that I'm not alone. I'm in one of those circles. I have brothers and sisters who are maybe in China, maybe in Denmark, maybe in Uganda, praying with me on that circle, putting their faces and the signs of dignity, the forehead and the nose, in the dust all together, humbling ourselves to one Creator. So this in itself, in the essence of this, is also uniting people together and making them humbling themselves. Like that, I just want to remind you that mainly the 2 things that Islam used to deal with racism is marginalizing racism and racists, and instead of normalizing it, and belittling racism and racists. Thank you very much. And I know that was a bit long. Okay.
Okay, great. So we've got time for a few questions or comments.
Should I close this now before the questions and answers?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Over the recording, yes, please.